Thousands of years ago, a group of mystics claimed they had uncovered the laws that govern everything from matter to mind. Today, neuroscience and quantum physics are just starting to catch up. These ideas weren't meant to stay locked in temples or buried in ancient scrolls. They were designed to be used to help people like you and me navigate life with clarity, intention, and power. They're called the 7 Hermetic Principles. And once you truly understand them, you'll stop seeing life as a random series of events and start recognizing the patterns, the cause and effect, and the subtle forces that shape your reality. No, these principles won't promise instant success or some magical shortcut to happiness. But if you apply them, really apply them, they can help you unlock the kind of life most people spend decades chasing. You'll make sharper decisions without being hijacked by stress, fear, or self-doubt. You'll finally start breaking out of the cycles that keep you stuck. Financially, emotionally, professionally, you'll create with purpose, communicate with confidence, lead with clarity, and maybe for the first time you'll feel like you're in control, not just surviving, but actually designing your life. This isn't about thinking positive. It's about learning how reality works and learning to work with it, not against it. So if that's something you're ready for, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this is where the journey begins. Let's dive into the 7 Hermetic Principles and how to use them to transform your inner world and your outer reality. What if I told you that everything you experience in your life, your successes, your struggles, your relationships, even how the world seems to you, starts not in the outside world, but inside your own mind? That's the core idea behind the first Hermetic principle, known as mentalism. It's summed up in a single, simple line from the Kybalion. The all is mind. The universe is mental. At first glance, this may sound abstract, even strange. But at its heart, this principle is incredibly practical. It suggests that the universe we live in is not just physical matter, but the product of consciousness. And more than that, it tells us that everything begins as thought. Now, this doesn't mean the world is fake or that matter isn't real. Rather, it means that all form, all experience, all reality begins in the realm of the mind. Before something becomes tangible, before it exists as a structure or a moment or a relationship, it first exists as an idea, a possibility, a mental image. We often forget this because we're so focused on what we can touch and see. But behind every single object or outcome is a thought that came first. Take any part of your life. Your career, for example. The job you're in right now is the result of a series of choices. And each of those choices was driven by thoughts. What you believed about yourself, what you expected from the world, what you feared or hoped for. The same is true for your health, your relationships, your goals. What you believe to be true, what you repeatedly think about, has a direct effect on what you do, and therefore on what happens. Think about the way your mindset can completely shift how you experience something. Imagine walking into a room full of people. If you believe that no one there will be interested in you, you'll likely feel anxious and maybe even keep to yourself. But if you believe that someone in that room is excited to meet you, your posture changes, your energy shifts, and suddenly you're open to connection. Same room, same people, different thoughts, and that means a completely different experience. This is how mentalism shows up in real life. It's not just a philosophical idea, it's something we live, often without realizing it. The outer world reflects our inner world, and when we accept that, we begin to understand that we're not just observers of reality, we're participants in shaping it. You don't need to be spiritual or mystical to understand this. Modern science backs it up in many ways. Neuroscience has shown us that the brain doesn't fully distinguish between a vividly imagined event and one that actually happens. That's why elite athletes visualize their performances before stepping onto the field, because the mind responds as if it were real. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most effective forms of modern psychology, is built on the idea that our thoughts drive our emotions and behavior. Even in medicine, we see the power of the mind in the placebo effect, A person can physically improve simply because they believe they are being healed. The idea that thoughts become things isn't just motivational poster talk. It's a reflection of how reality works. The more clearly we think, the more intentionally we use our minds, the more influence we have over our experience of the world. Of course, this doesn't mean that just thinking positively will magically fix everything. Mentalism is not about fantasy, it's about focus. It's about recognizing that every choice we make begins in our minds. The principle encourages us to take responsibility for our inner world, because from that space we shape the outer one. If there's one practical takeaway from mentalism, it's this. If you want to change your life, start by changing your thoughts. Start by becoming aware of what's happening in your mental space. Notice the stories you tell yourself. Are they stories of power or of limitation? Are they rooted in fear or in possibility? The mind is always active. The question is whether it's working for you or against you. When you understand that the universe is mental in nature, you begin to treat your thoughts differently. You start choosing them more carefully. You realize that you are not at the mercy of random circumstances. You are a conscious creator, and with practice, you can learn to guide your inner world in a direction that leads to greater clarity, purpose, and peace. Mentalism, in the end, is not about believing in something supernatural. It's about realizing that the most powerful tool you have in this life isn't money, or status, or luck. It's your mind. And when you learn to use it well, everything else begins to change. You've probably heard the phrase, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's one of those sayings that sounds poetic, almost mystical, but once you truly understand it, you start to see it everywhere. This is the heart of the second Hermetic principle, correspondence. At its core, this principle tells us that there is harmony, agreement, and connection between all levels of reality. What happens on one level of existence reflects what's happening on another. The smallest patterns repeat themselves in the largest systems. The invisible shapes the visible. The internal gives birth to the external. That might sound a little abstract at first, so let's bring it down to earth. Have you ever noticed how your mood can color everything around you? On days when you're feeling confident and clear, the world seems more welcoming. People smile at you. You handle challenges better. You see opportunity instead of frustration. But when you're stressed or overwhelmed, it feels like everything is working against you. Even small problems can set you off. That's correspondence in motion. Your inner state is mirrored by your outer experience. This principle suggests that if we want to change what's happening in our lives, we need to look within first. Not because we're to blame for everything, but because our inner world plays a much bigger role in shaping our experience than we often realize. Take relationships, for example. If you consistently attract people who don't respect your boundaries, it might be worth asking, do you respect your own boundaries? If you feel unseen or unheard, is it possible that you're not fully expressing yourself? These aren't easy questions, but they point to something powerful. The outside world reflects what's going on inside. This principle doesn't just apply to individuals. It applies to everything. We can see it in nature, science, and society. The structure of an atom resembles the structure of a solar system. Fractal patterns, those infinitely repeating shapes, appear in everything from leaves and rivers to stock market charts and brain neurons. Even in organizations and cultures, we often find that what's going on at the top, the above, trickles down and affects the entire system, the below. In psychology, this idea shows up in the form of projection. That's when we unconsciously take something we're feeling, or struggling with internally, and see it out there in the world or in other people. For instance, someone who hasn't dealt with their own anger might think the world is full of rude, aggressive people. Someone deeply insecure might interpret neutral feedback as a personal attack. In both cases, it's the inner landscape shaping the outer perception. Understanding this principle gives us an incredible tool for personal growth. Instead of constantly reacting to life or trying to fix everything outside of us, we begin to ask deeper questions. What is my current situation reflecting back to me? What might this conflict be showing me about myself? If I don't like what I'm experiencing, what do I need to shift within? This isn't about self-blame or pretending we control everything. Life has its randomness, and there are many things beyond our personal influence. But correspondence invites us to look honestly at the parts we do have power over. And that starts inside our own minds, hearts, and behaviors. Let's say you're feeling stuck at work. You've been passed over for promotions, and your ideas don't seem to land. Instead of immediately assuming your boss is the problem, this principle asks, what's happening within you that might be mirrored in this situation? Do you believe in your own voice? Do you speak with clarity and confidence? Are you truly engaged with the work or just going through the motions? As difficult as it may be to face, the outer reality might be reflecting your inner doubts. Of course, this principle works in a positive direction too. When you begin to shift your inner world, your beliefs, your intentions, your mindset, you'll start to see changes in your circumstances. A more grounded, grateful, and self-aware version of you tends to attract healthier relationships, better decisions, and more aligned opportunities. People around you respond differently when your energy changes, even if nothing else has. One of the most empowering aspects of this principle is that it reminds us of our creative role in life. We're not just recipients of random events. We are participants in a deeply interconnected system. When we tend to our inner garden, the outer garden starts to bloom too. So how do you apply this principle? You begin by paying attention, noticing your reactions, listening to your language, reflecting on the patterns that keep showing up. If something keeps repeating in your external life, chances are it's tied to something internal that wants your attention. Journaling can help. Meditation or quiet reflection can help. Therapy, coaching, even honest conversations with trusted friends can help. The goal isn't to become perfect or to fix yourself. It's simply to align, to bring your inner world into greater harmony, so that your outer world can follow. As above, so below. As within, so without. These aren't just poetic words. They're a mirror, and when we learn to look into that mirror, with curiosity instead of fear, we gain insight, we gain clarity, and eventually we gain the ability to live in a way that feels more whole, more aligned, and more alive. Everything in the universe is moving, even the things that seem solid and still. Your desk, the floor beneath your feet, the screen you're watching this on, are actually made up of tiny particles vibrating at incredible speeds. At the atomic level, nothing is truly at rest. That's the essence of the third Hermetic principle, vibration. This principle states that everything, absolutely everything, is in motion. Nothing is still. Nothing is fixed. And while that might sound like a fact for physicists and scientists to explore, the truth is, this principle has huge implications for our everyday lives too. Most of us go through life assuming that reality is mostly stable, that things just are the way they are. But once you understand vibration, you begin to realize that reality is actually fluid, dynamic, and always in motion. And most importantly, that includes you. Your thoughts have a vibration. So do your emotions. Joy, gratitude, anger, fear. These aren't just feelings. They're frequencies. You can feel it when you're in a room with someone who's radiating peace or excitement. You can also feel it when someone walks in full of tension or resentment, even if they don't say a word. We pick up on each other's vibrations all the time, often without realizing it. It's not magic. It's resonance. In simple terms, resonance means that similar vibrations attract or respond to one another. That's why certain people, places, or situations just seem to click with you, while others feel off. It's not just chemistry or personality. It's vibration. We're tuning forks, constantly giving off and responding to subtle energy signals. And we tend to attract what matches us. When you're in a state of calm, optimism, or openness, you tend to draw in experiences and people that reflect those qualities. On the other hand, when you're stuck in fear, defensiveness, or resentment, It's like you're broadcasting on a frequency that attracts more of the same. The good news is this isn't something you're stuck with. Vibration can shift. In fact, it's always shifting. And with awareness, you can begin to influence that shift consciously. If this sounds a bit like the law of attraction, it's because the two ideas are deeply related. But while law of attraction is more focused on what you get from the world, the principle of vibration is about what you're sending out and how that affects your reality. It's more foundational. It reminds us that change doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. One of the most eye-opening parts of learning this principle is realizing how much power we have to influence our state. Think of a time when you were in a bad mood, but something simple shifted it. Music, a conversation, a walk, or even just stepping outside. Those things didn't magically solve all your problems, but they changed your vibration, and that shift opened the door to a better experience. That's how fast this can work. We all have patterns, habits of thought and emotion that we return to again and again. Some of those patterns are uplifting, and some are draining. The principle of vibration asks us to become more aware of those patterns. To ask, what state am I in right now? What energy am I putting into the world? Because even if you don't say a word, your energy speaks for you. This doesn't mean we have to force ourselves to feel happy all the time. Life is complex. Emotions are real, and pretending you feel fine when you don't isn't helpful. But what this principle does offer is an invitation to remember that no emotional or mental state is permanent. You're not frozen. You're vibrating. You can shift. And the ways to shift your vibration aren't complicated. Breathing deeply for 60 seconds, moving your body, listening to a piece of music that makes you feel alive, reaching out to someone who lifts your spirit, taking 5 minutes to write down what you're grateful for. These aren't just self-help tricks, they're tools for transformation, because everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel is affecting your frequency. Sometimes the idea of energy gets dismissed as something too abstract or spiritual. But energy is not a vague concept. It's a scientific fact. And more importantly, it's something you've been feeling your entire life. When you say someone gives off a good vibe, that's not just a figure of speech. It's your nervous system responding to the subtle vibrations around you. And you do the same for others. So what happens when you begin to take responsibility for your own vibration? Not in a perfectionist way, but in a curious, compassionate way. You start to see that you're not just reacting to the world, you're shaping it. Your internal frequency is like a tuning signal, and the more intentional you are with it, the more your external life begins to come into alignment. Understanding the principle of vibration doesn't make life perfect, but it gives you a powerful compass. It reminds you that you are not a fixed object in a random universe. You're a dynamic, moving, energetic being, deeply connected to everything around you. And that means you're never truly stuck. No matter where you are or what's going on, you can shift. You can recalibrate. You can tune yourself into a better frequency. And with time, the world around you will begin to harmonize with it. Life is full of opposites, love and hate, light and dark, success and failure, confidence and fear. These contrasts shape how we understand the world, and often how we understand ourselves. The fourth Hermetic principle, polarity, helps us make sense of these opposites, not as separate forces but as two extremes of the same thing. The Kybalion puts it like this: everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. What this principle teaches is both simple and powerful, that what we think of as opposites, hot and cold, good and bad, positive and negative, aren't entirely different things. They're actually the same thing measured in degrees. Imagine a thermometer. At one end is cold, at the other is hot, but it's all temperature. There's no line where cold suddenly becomes hot. It's a gradual shift. Same thing with emotions. Love and hate, believe it or not, are part of the same spectrum of feeling. Indifference is their true opposite. In fact, many relationships fall apart not because one partner starts hating the other, but because they stop caring altogether. This idea can be a bit of a mental shift, but once you start to see life this way, it changes how you respond to challenges. Instead of feeling stuck in negativity, you realize you're just at one end of a spectrum, and that means you can move, you can shift. Think of a time when you were afraid to speak up in a meeting or try something new. You might have labeled that fear as weakness. But what if it's just courage sitting at the low end of the scale? What if, with the right support and mindset, you could start sliding toward the other end? That's what the principle of polarity offers: movement. You're not locked into one state. Every emotion, every thought, every situation exists on a spectrum, and you have the power to adjust your position on that spectrum, not by flipping a switch, but by gradually shifting your focus, your mindset, your energy. This also helps us better understand the ups and downs of life. If you've ever gone through a tough season, a divorce, a layoff, a serious setback, you know how hard it can be to see the light at the other end. But the deeper you understand polarity, the more you begin to realize that the same spectrum that includes pain and loss also includes growth and renewal. Often, they're part of the same process. That doesn't mean we should dismiss or minimize pain. On the contrary, this principle encourages us to accept that pain is real, but it's not the full picture. The presence of struggle means the potential for strength is also there. The existence of chaos means order can emerge. The coldest winter contains the coming spring. You can also apply this principle to how you see other people. When someone lashes out in anger, it's tempting to see them as simply bad or toxic. But through the lens of polarity, you might see them differently. Not as broken, but as someone stuck at one end of a shared emotional spectrum. Maybe they're overwhelmed, scared, or acting from pain. That shift in perception doesn't mean tolerating harm, but it does offer understanding and sometimes compassion. In our own minds, polarity gives us tools for change. Let's say you're overwhelmed with negative thinking. Rather than trying to fight it or suppress it, try observing it as one end of a scale. If you're feeling hopeless, that's a sign that hope still exists. It's just on the other end. Instead of asking, "How do I stop feeling this?" ask, "What's one small shift that would move me a little closer to the other side?" Maybe it's turning off the news. Maybe it's stepping outside for some air. Maybe it's talking to someone who lifts you up. These small shifts add up. The more we practice moving along the spectrum, the easier it becomes to shift our energy, our mindset, even our circumstances. It's not about forcing positivity or ignoring what's hard. It's about recognizing that we're not as stuck as we think. There's always movement available to us, even if it's subtle at first. The principle of polarity also helps us break free from black and white thinking. Life is rarely all good or all bad. People aren't just heroes or villains. You're not either a success or a failure. Most things in life are complex, layered, and full of in-between spaces. The more we can live in that nuance, the more peace we find. Extremes are exhausting. Balance is where we grow. At the end of the day, this principle invites us to stop judging where we are and instead start shifting. It teaches us to accept duality as part of life, while also remembering that we're never fixed at one pole. We're always capable of movement. The distance between fear and courage, between despair and hope, between self-doubt and confidence, isn't as far as it seems. And just like temperature can change with time and attention, so can we. What goes up must come down and then back up again. That's not just an old saying. It's a truth that echoes across everything in life. From your energy levels during the day to the rise and fall of the stock market, everything moves in cycles. This is the fifth Hermetic principle, known as rhythm, and once you begin to see it in action, you'll realize it's been guiding your life all along. The principle of rhythm teaches that everything flows in and out, everything rises and falls, and that these movements are not random. They are natural, built-in, and universal. Nothing stays in one state forever. You don't stay high and you don't stay low. Life is always in motion. Take a simple example, your energy during a typical day. You might feel alert and productive in the morning, hit a slump in the afternoon, then get a second wind after dinner. That's not just you being off or lazy. That's your circadian rhythm, your body's internal clock doing exactly what it's meant to do. If you try to force your way through those low points without rest or reset, you burn out faster. But if you work with the rhythm, taking breaks, adjusting your tasks to match your energy, you become more effective, not less. This concept shows up everywhere. Artists and writers often talk about creative blocks as if they're failures. But creativity doesn't run on demand. It comes in waves. Sometimes inspiration is abundant. Other times it's quiet. That doesn't mean it's gone forever. It's just part of the rhythm. If you understand that, you stop panicking in the quiet seasons. You stop thinking you've lost it. Instead, you learn to wait for the wave to return and use the downtime to rest, learn, or reflect. In the business world, we see this clearly in market cycles. Economies expand, contract, and expand again. Bull markets don't last forever, and neither do recessions. Companies rise, plateau, and pivot. None of this is a failure of the system, it is the system. Those who understand rhythm don't overreact to short-term drops. They ride them out with a long-term view. Rhythm rewards patience. Emotionally, we also move in cycles. Nobody feels great all the time. Everyone goes through periods of joy, sadness, clarity, confusion, motivation, and doubt. When we forget this, we start judging ourselves for feeling low, as if happiness should be a constant. But that's not how human beings are wired. Emotional highs are part of the same rhythm as emotional lows. Instead of resisting them, what if we gave ourselves permission to feel them, without making them mean something terrible about who we are? Psychologists have even charted this rhythm in the way we handle stress and recovery. Burnout doesn't come from hard work alone. It comes from ignoring the natural need for rest after effort. Our systems can handle intensity, but not endlessly. When you push through the rhythm instead of respecting it, you pay the price with exhaustion, disconnection, or even illness. But if you allow for recovery, if you take breaks, sleep, unplug, slow down, you come back stronger. Rhythm, honored, builds resilience. There's an elegance to this law when you really start to live by it. You begin to recognize that nothing is permanent, not the good times and not the bad. That means you don't have to cling so tightly to moments of success, fearing they'll slip away. And you don't have to dread the hard moments, thinking they'll never end. Everything moves, everything returns. You just have to stay in the flow. So how do you apply this in real life? First, stop fighting the lows. They aren't punishments. They're part of the pattern. When you're tired, it's not weakness, it's information. When you're uninspired, it might be time to pause rather than push. Low points can be used for reflection, for quiet planning, for gentle maintenance. They make the high points possible. Second, learn to ride the wave. Get familiar with your own personal cycles, daily, weekly, even seasonally. When do you typically feel your best? When do you usually need rest or solitude? Use those insights to plan your time, your work, your relationships. Don't try to be on all the time. Be wise about when to act and when to wait. Finally, practice neutrality. One of the deeper teachings of the Kybalion is that you don't have to swing emotionally with every external change. You can develop a kind of mental center, a place where you observe the rhythm without being thrown around by it. The world may rise and fall, but you can find your footing inside that movement. It's a kind of emotional maturity, one that grows with time, experience, and awareness. The beauty of this principle is that it brings relief. If you're in a slump, it won't last. If you're flying high, enjoy it. Just don't expect it to stay forever. Let go of the need for everything to be linear or permanent. Embrace the curve. Trust the pattern. Know that every tide that goes out is already turning to come back in. Do you run your life, or are you reacting to it? It's a powerful question, one that most of us don't ask often enough. The sixth Hermetic Principle, cause and effect, challenges us to stop living passively and start recognizing the deeper forces at play in our everyday lives. According to this principle, nothing happens by chance. Every outcome, every experience, every moment, good or bad, has a cause, whether we see it or not. At its core, this principle says that we live in a world of laws, not randomness. There's a structure to reality. Things don't just happen out of nowhere. Every effect has a cause, and that cause, in turn, came from a previous cause. It's a chain, a continuous sequence of action and reaction, decision and result, input and output. You're either creating the causes that shape your life, or you're being swept along by causes you didn't choose, but are still subject to. This might sound obvious at first. Of course, actions have consequences. But what's easy to forget is that the small, invisible causes often create the biggest visible effects. That successful product launch you saw on social media, it wasn't luck. It was the result of months, maybe years, of research, planning, late nights, and careful execution. That person who suddenly got healthy, odds are they didn't just get lucky with genetics. They changed their diet, started moving, maybe dealt with stress they'd been carrying for years. You just didn't see the cause, but the effect makes it clear that it was there. Western science supports this principle thoroughly. Newton's third law famously states, "For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction." In behavioral psychology, there's the stimulus-response-consequence loop. Something happens, we react, and a result follows. Nothing in our brains or in our bodies is random. Patterns of cause and effect run through every choice we make. And every emotion, every result, every outcome. Where this principle becomes especially useful is when we begin applying it inward. Most of us are conditioned to react, to blame circumstances, timing, even other people for how things turn out. And sure, some factors are out of our control. But the principle of cause and effect reminds us that the power lies in choosing how we show up. We can either live as causes, creating intentional impact, or as effects, constantly reacting to the world around us. It starts with awareness. When something in your life isn't working, instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What series of causes brought this here?" That toxic relationship, did it begin with ignoring red flags? That financial stress, was it built over time from choices to delay or avoid? That job you feel stuck in, how many little yes or silences led to this place? This isn't about guilt. It's not about beating yourself up for the outcomes you don't like. It's about taking ownership of your role in the chain of cause and effect. Because once you do, you can change the course. You can't control every variable in life, but you can choose to be more conscious of the causes you're creating right now. When you shift into that mindset, life begins to feel more manageable, even when things get hard. You stop waiting for the right time or the perfect opportunity, and you start realizing that every small decision is a cause. Sending that email, showing up on time, choosing water over soda, speaking up in that meeting, listening to your gut instead of ignoring it. These little things create ripples, and those ripples turn into results. You also begin to see how much power you have in your relationships. You realize that your tone, your consistency, your presence, all shape how people respond to you. When you're the cause of kindness, patience, clarity, you tend to receive more of it in return. If not immediately, then gradually. And if you're getting responses you don't like, instead of blaming others, you start asking, what am I doing or not doing that might be leading to this? That's the radical shift cause and effect offers. The mindset of responsibility, not reaction. Not responsibility in a burdensome way, but in an empowering one. You are not a victim of life's randomness. You're a participant in a system of energy and momentum. Your results are not magic. They are mirrors of the choices that led up to them. One of the most powerful things about this principle is how freeing it becomes. When you truly embrace it, you no longer need to hope for luck or fear misfortune. You start investing in better causes, better habits, better thinking, better boundaries, better intentions. You move through life more deliberately, more clearly. You stop asking, what will happen to me? And start asking, what am I putting in motion? Of course, Life won't always reward your efforts instantly, and some effects may take time or show up in unexpected forms. But once you start living as the cause, not just the effect, you take back your power. You stop drifting. You start steering. Because in the end, this principle is not just a rule of the universe. It's a guide, a reminder that life isn't happening to you. It's happening because of you. In our everyday language, the word gender often brings up thoughts of biology, identity, or cultural roles. But in the Hermetic tradition, gender means something broader, deeper, and far more universal. The seventh and final Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, teaches that everything contains both masculine and feminine qualities, not in the physical or social sense, but as two distinct types of energy or forces that exist in all things. The Kybalion tells us that gender is in everything. It's a creative law, a fundamental part of the universe. Every idea, every form of expression, every creation arises from the interaction between these two forces. The masculine principle is about action, logic, direction, structure, and will. The feminine principle is about intuition, feeling, receptivity, creativity, and flow. Both are essential. Neither is superior. And together they create balance, progress, and innovation. You can see this balance play out in the creative process. Take music, for example. Inspiration, the feeling that something wants to be expressed, is a feminine energy. It flows in. It arrives unannounced, emotional, mysterious. But in order to turn that feeling into a finished song, you need structure. You need rhythm, harmony, editing. That's the masculine energy coming into play, giving form to the formless. Without one, the other doesn't lead to anything complete. This principle doesn't just apply to art. In leadership, some of the most effective people are those who embody both energies. They have the masculine confidence to take decisive action, make hard calls, and push things forward. But they also carry the feminine sensitivity to listen, to read the emotional temperature in a room, to build trust. When a leader leans too far into masculine energy, commanding without listening, they often lose the support of their team. When they lean too far into feminine energy, feeling without direction, they may lack follow-through. But when the two are in balance, something powerful happens. Clarity meets empathy. Vision meets connection. We also see this dynamic in personal relationships. Healthy partnerships are often built not on sameness, but on a dance between these energies. Sometimes one partner brings logic while the other brings emotion. Sometimes roles reverse depending on the situation. The goal isn't to conform to traditional gender roles, but to be aware of the energetic balance and how these forces can support, challenge, and strengthen each other. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in modern psychology, echoed this idea in his concept of anima and animus. He believed that every man carries within him a feminine side, anima, and every woman carries a masculine side, animus. These inner energies, when ignored, can lead to imbalance. But when acknowledged and integrated, they lead to wholeness. Jung encouraged individuals to develop both sides of themselves, to think and feel, to act and reflect, to lead and listen. This principle also shows up in ancient Eastern philosophy. In Taoism, for example, Yin and Yang represent feminine and masculine energies, respectively. Yin is dark, receptive, internal. Yang is bright, active, external. Neither is good or bad. They simply are. Life flows best when the two are balanced and allowed to move naturally between each other. When one dominates or is suppressed, things fall out of harmony. Understanding the principle of gender invites us to bring this awareness into our daily lives. In decision-making, we might ask, am I leaning too far into logic and ignoring how I feel? Or am I letting emotion steer me without enough structure or clarity? Neither approach is wrong, but either one taken too far becomes incomplete. In our culture, masculine traits like productivity, decisiveness, and control are often rewarded, while feminine traits like intuition, empathy, and receptivity are overlooked or undervalued. But the truth is, the most grounded, powerful, creative people we meet often carry both energies within them, confident without being rigid, sensitive without being passive. The principle of gender challenges us to honor both energies, not just in ourselves but in others. It asks us to move beyond narrow definitions of strength or success. It asks us to listen to the quieter voice within, and to act when the time is right. It reminds us that receiving is as vital as giving, that reflection is as necessary as doing, that nurturing an idea is just as important as executing it. So how do we apply this principle in real life? First, we practice awareness. Notice which energy you tend to default to. Do you often rush to act without feeling? Do you wait too long, lost in reflection, avoiding forward movement? Then, begin to strengthen the less used side. If you tend to lead with masculine energy, make space for stillness, intuition, and collaboration. If you tend to lead with feminine energy, practice setting boundaries, creating structure, and trusting your direction. The goal isn't to become someone you're not. It's to become more whole, to access a greater range of tools, responses, and possibilities within yourself and in the way you move through the world. Because at the end of the day, the principle of gender reminds us of something beautiful and humbling, that all creation, all growth, all balance, whether in the cosmos or in your own mind, depends on this ancient and sacred dance between the masculine and the feminine. And when we begin to live in harmony with both, we begin to live more fully, more freely, and more aligned with the deeper rhythms of life itself. So here we are. We've journeyed through all 7 Hermetic Principles, timeless ideas passed down through ancient wisdom, yet still deeply relevant to how we think, act, and live today. These aren't just abstract concepts or spiritual poetry. These are tools, practical lenses that can help you navigate life with more clarity, purpose, and personal power. Mentalism teaches you that your thoughts shape your world. Correspondence reminds you that your inner state and your outer life are reflections of each other. Vibration shows you that you're never truly stuck. Everything can shift. Polarity helps you move through extremes with grace. Rhythm gives you patience and timing. Cause and effect returns your power by reminding you that your choices matter. And gender brings it all together, showing you how to create from balance and wholeness. These principles work together like gears in a machine. When you understand them, not just intellectually but personally, they change how you relate to everything. Your relationships, your career, your health, your inner world. So, let me ask you this. Which principle speaks to you the most right now? Which one feels like it's knocking on your door, asking to be explored? Let us know in the comments. We truly love to hear your thoughts. And if this sparked something in you, if it gave you a new perspective, or even just a moment of wait, that makes sense, then go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ready to go a little deeper. Someone who's not just looking for answers, but for understanding. Because once you start to see the patterns, the laws, the hidden forces behind everything, you don't just play the game of life. You start to master it.